Hey guys, this is Yoda. This will be hopefully weekly tier list update for Mythic Plus on where we're in beta. This is kind of where we're at right now. Last night on stream, we were talking with a few people, and this is basically where we ended up, I guess. So yeah, without further ado, we'll start at the top. Destro Warlock got buffed to the moon in the most recent beta patch. There was a hotfix that gave them like a small nerf, but I'm pretty sure it was not nearly enough. They still rate of fire, I think, on single target even. So yeah, Jester Warlock, if you watch any beta stream, usually they're just doing like 10 to 20% higher overall than second place. So yeah, this is where they're at right now. My guess is they'll get nerfed like a little bit, and we'll just be here in War Within Season 1. Could easily happen. But you never know. Anything can happen. So yeah, Jester Warlock, definitely the strongest spec right now. Og and Mage, people are asking if the Og nerfs mean anything. They don't. Og will just do less damage in raid and keys, but it will still just be in until you see a patch note where Og no longer buffs tanks and healers and makes the key easier for them, makes the key feel lower for them so they can survive higher key levels. Augmentation Evoker is here to stay in Mythic Plus. Mage, I think not much changed. Some buffs, some nerfs, but overall it's the same thing. They're just tuned, relatively high, and they have 5% intellect for the whole group, plus all the utility that they always have, so they're in the meta for sure. Except Fire Mage, I think I saw Fire Mage doing tank damage in one of those keys. I would expect it to get buffed, but for now I think you play Frost and Arcane. Next, the tanks. So almost all of the tanks got buffs. I think VDH, Brew, and Paladin got baseline 15%. Warrior got like 30 baseline plus some skills, so I think it's like roughly 35%. Bear got 20% to all bear skills, but the some Moonfire abilities got nerfed, and Moonfire baseline also got nerfed. Blood Decay got 10% damage, but Bone Storm was nerfed, so it only eats 5 Bone Shields now to give you the same duration, which is definitely a nerf because it doesn't reduce the cooldown of Dancing Root Weapon enough, or as much. So this is, I think, where the tanks are at, which is pretty good, honestly. When's the last time you could say like 3 tanks were viable for maybe meta, and then 3 more were just one tier below, right? This is actually pretty good as far as tanks balance goes. Although I do think right now Vengeance Demon Hunter is by far the best tank, which I think is an accident. So they did get the 15% baseline, but Vengeance Demon Hunter also got randomly a 300% buff to one of their hero talents in the Fellscar tree called Burning Blades. It used to say your Soul Cleave does 15% more as fire damage. Now it says 60. I'm not sure how that happened or why, but surely that was a mistake, and they didn't mean to buff Vengeance Demon Hunter damage to be higher than everyone for no reason. Hopefully that gets changed, and then all the tanks are going to be... balance is going to be somewhat good. I think if you were trying to pick bottom reroll to a tank, my choice is still Bear, and you just play Moonbear. Druid of the Claw did receive massively huge buffs, and I think it's definitely going to be the choice in Raid now, but in Mythic Plus, having Moonbear just gives you like an extra cooldown to rotate through in Lunar Beam, and has a little bit more self-sustain because you get more healing from Balloons Favored. Plus, you're able to play more defensive talents, especially in the second gate, because you don't have to take Tooth and Claw if you don't want to. So I think Moonbear is probably the easiest tank to play that can survive high keys. Still my choice for fodder reroll, assuming something happens to Vengeance Demon Hunter. Blood Decay did get, I think, relatively nerfed because it got less damage buffed than all the other tanks. Plus, it got the nerf to Dancing Rune Up and cooldown with the Bone Storm nerf. But I still think it's quite a strong tank defensively when played well. It does run into issues of getting one shot in higher keys, but you still have like many tools to deal with that. Like you have Lichborn on a short cooldown, Icebound, like Van Blood's cooldown's pretty short. You have Rune Tap if you play that, and Deathbringer does have some damage reduction baseline with Rune Carved Plates. So I think Blood Decay is in a pretty good spot right now as well. We'll go over the rest of the tanks too. Warrior, I think, can survive the higher keys. Has Spell Reflect as always. Damage is actually very good right now. It just does require healing in most situations. In situations where like stuff's dying and you can funnel victory rushes, it's probably very self-sustaining, but normally I'd say it requires a healer, unlike some of these tanks who don't require healers. Actually, you know what? All of these tanks require a healer except Blood Decay at this point, so it's just one of those tanks that doesn't take that much damage and requires healing, which is kind of where Blizzard wanted, I guess. So, nice work. Brew, kind of the same, I think. The main problem with Brew and Warrior is that their raid buff is just like the wrong raid buff. Doesn't buff id classes as much, and while they can survive the keys, they don't have like what I would call signature utilities. Like Paladin has, 1 minute sack, massive interrupts with their Avengers shields. Spell Ward, DH has their sigils and Chaos Brand. Bear has Mark of the Wild. I guess they don't really have that much other than Mark of the Wild, but Mark of the Wild is pretty good. You know, Blood Decay has good self-sustain in the grips. These tanks, you know, they can take the key, they can survive, but they don't have anything that I would compare, I would say is like on the level of these strong raid buffs or Paladin's crazy utility or DK self-sustain, so that's why I have him here. Paladin did get relatively nerfed as well, so they did get the baseline 15% to like their abilities, but Lightsmith, which was the only playable hero tree for Paladin, got nerfed by Secret Weapon, got about halved. I'm hoping at this point, since I love Paladin, that Templar just gets the treatment that Druid of the Claw got, and maybe Templar Paladin becomes playable somehow. But right now, Paladin's definitely looking the weakest. The Word of Glory buffs, you know, it still doesn't heal for very much. You just have to spam them, and then you spam them, and you go. That causes you to go out of mana, so you have to like drink between pulls, which is like unheard of for any other tank. So it's kind of unfortunate for Prot Pally. I still think you could survive the highest keys, and you do have really good utility when played perfectly. You just have to drink, and it's a lot harder than other tanks. So yeah, that's where I'm putting it. Next we go over healers. Restless Shaman, I think, caught a small nerf, but with the massive nerf that went to Ellie Shaman, Restless Shaman I think is now the best source of Sky Fury for the group. So that's why I still think they're probably the best healer when played well. It is a little bit harder to play because, as I said in the last video, they have long cast times compared to Holy Paladin, who all their casts are instant. I think they got some changes, but overall it seems to be a bit about net neutral. They still do good damage while having a lot of healing and good Paladin utility and instant casts. So I would say if you're fodder rerolling, my suggestion would be Holy Paladin, but if you like Shaman, you could also play Shaman. And then there's Druid. So Druid got some fat damage nerfs, like 15% to all their skills. I think it's still the highest damage healer, which goes to show how much damage it's doing before, which means at the top end, damage does seem to matter sometimes, you know? So even though it has lower healing, groups may find ways to make it work just for like the Mark of the Wild buff plus the additional damage you get. Kind of depends on the situation, so that's why I still have it in maybe meta. Although the rest of the druids I've been talking to are kind of in like full despair. They're like, oh, I'm working this hard, like it's so much harder to heal these keys and I don't even do that much more damage. It's just kind of the feeling that they have right now. So yeah, we'll see how it is. I have it in maybe meta right now, but it's definitely seems like the weaker of all these three, unless you need the damage. Presovoker, I have in strong. Honestly, I think Presovoker and Rest of Druid are kind of same level right now. Presovoker does roughly similar damage while still having a very high throughput. The main problem with Presovoker is that it's really hard to play, not only for you, but your group kind of has to play around you as well. Like if it's mayhem and people are scattered to the four winds, it's kind of hard to keep everyone up. And it also just doesn't have a raid buff, unfortunately, in this World of Warcraft that we live in. Like Restless Shaman has Sky Fury, Paladin has Diva Aura, Rest Druid has Mark of the Wild, Presovoker kind of just has Blessing the Bronze, which is not really that strong. In fact, doesn't really do anything. So yeah, that's why I have been strong. I think it'll be able to heal the highest keys, and it won't be holding your group at all damage-wise. I think it's one of the highest damage healers. It's just harder to play and doesn't have a raid buff, so that's why I have it here. Don't see it being meta, but I think it's definitely strong. Next we have we'll talk about some DPS. So Frost Decay actually somehow caught buffs, but I did move it down a tier mainly because Destro Warlock got buffed, and you know 2 slots are already taken, and if Destro Warlock's a 3rd slot, well, unlucky for everyone else, right? So I have Frost Decay and strong. I think it is definitely really strong. It does really good damage on AoE and cleave, like low target cleave, but it is a little bit behind on single target. Same with Unholy, but yeah, they still have grip. They're still really tanky. And they still, you know, have Death Strike, obviously, to keep himself alive. And they can still cheese a lot of mechanics. So I think Frost Decay is definitely a really, really good choice for melee and Mythic Plus. The only problem is that it is still a melee and Mythic Plus. So while you may be really strong and with good damage, you're probably not in the meta comp, my guess. Unholy, I kind of just have here. I think it's a bit weaker than Frost, but as I said in the last video, if you play DPS DK, the expectation is that you can play both. I think Unholy has some niche in Necrotic Wake. If you do like a massive first pull, Unholy DK is crazy for that. And then upstairs, it's really good for the big pull up there. And then also on Amarth, you have cooldowns with this Stan Lane build. You have cooldowns for every single ad set, so it's pretty good there too. But I think Frost Decay is probably better for most keys. Maybe even also in Necrotic Wake. For Rogue caught some massive buffs this patch. I think Assassination is one of the strongest DPS specs right now. The main issue they have is that they require a re-stealth. Like, a lot of their damage comes from the initial bleeds they get out from their stealth opener with Indiscriminate Carnage. And they don't have Shadow Dance anymore. If you don't get a re-stealth, chances are your damage on AoE packs is going to be very low. I think the single target isn't super good either. depending on your build. So we'll see where that goes. I think Rogue is probably one of the stronger DPS right now, just not meta, so I have him here. Sub Rogue is still strong. I think it does kind of close damage to Assassination, but it doesn't require resell, so Sub may be a better choice for like pug groups who aren't aware of how to play around a Rogue. And I have Outlaw in mid because their dungeon pool just doesn't really seem to suit Outlaw that well. Outlaw requires you to kind of like drop combat and then chain combat very quickly, and not have to mount or anything. So like, you know, in Dawnbreaker where you have to mount, like kill a pack and then mount, kill a pack and then mount, kill a pack and then mount, LL is terrible for that. And it also does still have the target cap, so there's a lot of dungeons where it doesn't fit. I think in particular, Miss of Turn of Scythe is pretty good for Outlaw, so if you're a true Rogue Master, you probably have to play all three, like Assassination most of the time, Sub-Rogue some of the time, and then Outlaw and Mist, so I think that's where our Rogue's at. The rest of the melee that I have here are all pretty strong. I've seen them all do really good damage. Personally, I like playing Survival Hunter. I find it very fun. Reminds me of Season 3 and 4, which was a lot of fun for me when I played Survival Hunter. Not quite as strong as it was back then, but yeah, I think all of these do really good damage. They're just melee DPS in a caster DPS world, so I don't have them as meta. Yeah. The other Warlock specs that aren't Destro, I haven't seen that many people playing, so it's really kind of hard to get a good read, but Demo looks like it could be pretty strong. Aff, I just haven't seen it all, so I just assume it's where it was before. If Destro gets nerfed like too much, then I could easily see Demo like being up here too. So we'll see what happens there. Moonkin. I did see one Moonkin at some point doing high damage in a singular key, and it is a caster DPS with a raid buff, so it's always in contention for meta. If Warlock gets nerfed too much and Moonkin catches maybe one more buff, I could see it making it into the meta. For now, I just have him in strong. Maybe that's too high. Windwalker we have in mid. Done a few keys with Damnal. I think Windwalker is like fine to do high keys with. It's just missing a little bit of damage, I think. So we have it in mid still. It did catch quite a few buffs, but I still think I'd sit mid. Ellie Shaman, unfortunately, was really fun to play before the nerfs, and it just got completely gutted, like minus 25% to a lot of the skills you were running, and I think a bug fix that made the lava bursts procs not quite as frequent. So I think the build people were playing before is not really that playable. You still have good funnel, you still have good signal target. It's just that the AoE damage, I think, is missing out right now. I haven't really seen that many people play Ellie because they're just depressed about how it used to be and compared to how it is now. But we'll put it in mid for now. I saw like one person play it, didn't seem like he was having a good time, so we're putting it here for now. Ranged hunters, I think, are also in mid. It just seems like they're either lower AoE or lower single target compared to Survival Hunter, and probably I think lower overall as well. So putting them in mid for now. I think if you play Hunter, you probably will want to play Survival if possible. Next we have the Unknown, so I just haven't seen these specs played that much. Arms Warrior, I haven't seen anyone play Arms Warrior. Barrel, I've seen a couple, but it's hard to get a good gauge from low sample size. Rat the same. I think there's also a bug with Rat that's making their damage different than what it should be, so I don't really know what's up with that either. Dev Evoker, probably won't be meta. Everyone since August in the meta. I haven't seen that many people play it, but I don't think it's super OP right now. Hard to tell. Shadow Priest I saw in a couple keys. Didn't seem like it was doing too hot, but again, low sample size, hard to judge. These three healers, I haven't seen anyone play. The healers I've been playing with have just been mostly playing these four. We were talking about Fire Mage. So that's it for the tier list update for now. Again, this is a beta Mythic Plus tier list. Everything can change week to week. Everything does change week to week. And also, the balance in the War Within Season 1 is, I think, going to be a lot better than Dragonflight Season 4. Dragonflight Season 4, if you weren't playing meta, you were like down horrendous, maybe like 2-3 key levels below like meta keys or even more. I think in the War Within Season 1, class balance is going to be a lot better. While I think the caster meta will be played in the top keys, it's definitely possible to do keys that are the same level, maybe one level with like a different comp, maybe with 1 or 2 melee even in there. Most of the tanks are viable. There's like a wide selection of healers, so definitely, I really hope no one uses this tier list to gate their like plus 10 like weekly keys, even though I know it's going to happen. But yeah, that's the final note. Thank you all for watching. Peace out.